Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In this episode, we want to talk about a few different topics. The first one being backyard breaks and what we think should happen to them in the hobby after some pretty terrible things that were said. You have me, Scott, Phil, Jeff, and Chris. Ty is not here. He'll be back next week. So, fellas, this last week, we had something that the hobby was entirely united behind. I even signed a change.com thing to try to make a change. I don't think that went anywhere because why would it for whatnot when there's money involved? But regardless, Backyard Breaks, Grant, is that his name? He made some pretty terrible comments about basically young kids, and they're like very pedophilia feeling. Basically, those in felt like, not saying he's this way, but like porn culture where your brain is just rotted out. And so you think of horrible stuff. And because of that, there's been a lot of backlash. If you want to go check out what he said, you can go to a different video than ours. But I want to ask your thoughts on the whole situation. Do we think that they should be more punished than what's going to happen? How do you think Top should handle it? How should Fanatics handle product allocation? What do we think of this whole situation? Phil, what are your thoughts?
I don't know if it matters what we think, because I think that the important voices that matter in the hobby have already spoken by not speaking. So, you could look at it from two directions. So how can you punish? You could cut off their customers and whatnot, could ban them temporarily, permanently, kick them off the platform, whatever, and actually uphold their ethics clauses in the contracts that everybody signs. I think 3 or 4 years ago, there was somebody that was interviewed on one of my friend's channels from Whatnot, and he specifically represented the ethics department and how they're always looking into how they can provide a better selling experience, and they're continuously looking at, this was after like one of the first scandals from Backyard. So I'd find it interesting to see if that department still exists today in its current form and what's going on there. If I could find the video, I would have mentioned the guy's name, but he was a pretty high ranking person. There's that side of things, and there's also what would be even more painful is supplying Backyard with product, the manufacturers, if they were to cut them off. I don't know their current arrangements with Topps and Panini, and if they have direct accounts with one or maybe both. But that would be a way to permanently punish them, because if Whatnot, unfortunately, guys, if Whatnot kicked them off, they would just go somewhere else, and all of their customers, almost all of them, would follow, in my opinion. And unfortunately, I know there's a big uproar, and I get why, based on the remarks that Grant made and a lot of other shady stuff that Backyard's done in the past. But I don't know if they're even going to lose a ton of customers, or if Whatnot's going to lose a ton of customers. And I'll tell you why. I know a lot of people are saying they're deleting the app and how they're never going to go again. They shot messages to Whatnot. They, went after them with their pitchforks on Twitter and everything. But I think the hobby is a little bit bifurcated, right? There's people like us that kind of stay out of that whole space, the breaking, the live breaks, Whatnot, etc. Like, I've got an account, but not always on there buying, and nor am I supporting Backyard. But I think whether you want to call it like degenerate like people, or people engaging in degenerate like behavior that are on that platform, they've made Backyard powerful. Backyard didn't make itself powerful. There was a demand for it, and they have a lot of fans. And, maybe our hobby is in some ways not connected to that hobby. So the people that are very, very mad and angry about this, we're not customers anyways. So it's not as simple as like, oh, if we stop ordering from Topps, I'll have to drop prices. No. If you delete the Whatnot app, you probably weren't using it much to begin with. If you're okay with the remarks, there's a better chance that you're a current customer of theirs. I know there's some points out there that have been made about like how Backyard is an important kind of piece in the ecosystem because of all of the volumes that they do and all of the repacks that they do. And a lot of the repack buyers are supplying cards to them. So I'm not saying that if like Backyard went away, that there wouldn't be like some secondary effect on us, and maybe some of our card prices would go down. But the only way to find that out is if they were to get banned, right? Not challenging the concept, but it'd be interesting to think about.
My thing is, there is going to be like, yes, for Whatnot, I feel like for them, they have the concern of losing their biggest seller, assuming they're their biggest seller on their platform. That's why they haven't said anything. They have a whole clause talking about this type of stuff will cause a ban, and it didn't happen for their biggest customer or biggest partner. And so that's kind of like Whatnot has had a lot of shady stuff at this point. I don't know why any of us would want to use it compared to other stuff. I feel like Fanatics Live is going to end up being better. But regardless, it's just a tough situation where if Whatnot banned them, other breakers are going to fill the void. It's not like we are dependent on backyard breaks in our hobby. They're not that important, just like none of us are that important. If we were gone, there'd be other great content creators people would pay attention to. So I don't think it's that big of a deal for these companies, but they still don't have the moral compass. I feel like pedophilia is one of those things where we all can agree is bad, and they don't have the moral compass to say something. And that's what pisses me off just as much as the comments. And so I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, a lot to talk about here. It is unique. What you said at the beginning is that the entire hobby seems to be on the same side of this. Although, as Phil said, maybe the hobby that is on Instagram or YouTube or Twitter is just a smaller subsection of the hobby, which we've found out in recent videos that we've posted. So my biggest question is what role or responsibility, if any, do those big companies have, like Fanatics or PSA? I think some people, like Phil said, have talked about this before, and especially this week. Neo had a great video on it. Dan the Cardman has been on top of it as well. And there have been other transgressions by Backyard Breaks. Even when they were opening at the PSA headquarters, there were some off-color comments made, and it just seems to be this week's comments seem to be a result of nothing ever happening with the other things that went on. So at what point then does PSA say, well, we don't want these people doing repacks at our headquarters because it looks bad for us? Or Fanatics saying we don't want to have an allocation go to this company because it looks bad for us. I don't know. We've talked about how money is the driving factor in this hobby, for better or worse. And I think with the lack of response we've seen from the bigger companies, that's continues to be reinforced with this. So it's uplifting to see the hobby all together against something, but it's also upsetting and disappointing that this is even a hobby topic. And especially if we're trying to get more people into the hobby, we're trying to get younger people, kids, women, people who have maybe not traditionally been in the hobby involved. This is the sort of thing that keeps them away. And that's really disappointing.
It's also disappointing that these things happen and then they just nothing changes. Like, what can change? I guess that's the hard part, but nothing ever changes. That's my biggest gripe with all of it. Is there's a scandal every week, and we talk about it on our little podcasts, and then nothing changes. It's not up to us anymore. It's like literally all the big brands that have the ability to do something, they just won't, and it will never change. That is my concern. So, what are you thinking, Chris?
Yeah, I didn't really expect Whatnot to do anything. Like, it just seems like these backyard guys are like Whatnot's biggest star, so they're not going to do anything. We've seen that happen like all throughout like Hollywood celebrity culture. Like, if you generate money, people aren't going to. You can get away with pretty much anything. Unfortunately, that's a pretty American thing. But I am shocked that Topps hasn't said something. Like, Topps is supposed to be like a family company. Like, they made candy and bubble gum, for kids and sports cards. They just announced that they made $1.8 billion in revenue. Like, Fanatics nearly quadrupled Topps' revenue. So they don't need backyard breaks. They do not need these people to generate money for them. Someone else will absolutely fill this hole if they create it. I'm just flabbergasted. It's been almost a week and Topps has not said a word about this. Like, again, I don't really care about Whatnot. I didn't expect them to do anything, but I'm shocked that Topps has not said anything.
It's disappointing for sure.
Yeah.
Just disheartening too, because like you said, Scott, things don't seem to ever change, and then something worse happens, and you think, well, this has to be what causes the change. Has to be the thing that makes this company say something, and then so far it hasn't.
I know this video could get 10,000 views, but there's a chance no one at Topps sees it or even cares if they do see it. That's the hardest part. Is it feels like they're very out of touch with still in regards to the community's opinion. We saw this like even with the Black Parallel, not comparing the two because they're not comparable, but they didn't understand that that would cause annoyance. And maybe it's not as big as we thought because we're kind of in our own lane, but it's one of those things where they just need to, if they want to get into our good graces, which I don't know if they even care, there's certain things that are just slam dunks that aren't hard to do. Just say it's bad, like call it out. Say there's no room for it in the hobby. Just do something. And I think it'd be a slam dunk PR move for them. I don't understand why no one is taking advantage of that from a selfish perspective, let alone from a moral perspective. I don't.
Good point.
Yeah, just another sign of like prioritization, right?
Yeah,
Like, who's this hobby really for, right? What are our values? Generating money. How are we going to run this business? Through breakers, at the expense of collectors, at the expense of existing hobbyists. This is who we really care about. And I mean, their inaction is just a sign again of this is what we're going to feed into. The degenerate gambler, that side of the hobby, is what we're paying most attention to. These are our best customers. Even if they don't have the longest lifespan in the hobby, this is just who we care about. And unfortunately, there's an argument to be made that even if Backyard was to go away, so Scott brought up a point where like another breaker could just fill their shoes. They're not the only sketchy breaker out there. So
they are.
Maybe this is more of a system issue. It's like more deeply rooted, ingrained into all these live selling platforms. Like going back to what I said initially, the demand created this. People turning a blind eye because they don't care about the behavior, the antics, right? If it's not them, it'll be some other sketchy breaker probably filling their shoes and people being okay with it again. And them being the new top breaker on whatnot. And there being scandals. And as Scott said, people talk about it for a little bit and then it just goes away and then it just goes back and they keep on getting supply. They won't get cut off. Whatnot allows them to stay on the platform or name your breaking platform of choice. So this could happen on Fanatics Live too. It really could. And some other breaking platforms like Drip, like Loop. I'm not saying that they're all really like lackadaisical in their ethics policies and they don't, really have much standards, because some probably do. Some platforms are a little bit better. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like this is what the hobby's turned into, guys. So there's what Fanatics wants, and there's like what the hobby currently is. It's a lot of it is just this whole like degenerate, like this is the hobby. Don't even consider it a hobby, because hobby could be like subjective. I might have a different hobby than you. This is the industry, right? Yeah. It's an industry now, and the industry's turned into this mess, unfortunately. Such blurred lines between gambling and what ostensibly was considered a hobby to collect cards by many. And I know a lot of us are still doing that, but some people can't tell the difference, and that's how they justify it. I'm in a hobby. I'm doing a hobby. This is fine. This is like people golfing. Any hobby costs money. Honey, you spent $244,000 last year. And we talked about it in one of last week's episodes, but how many more stories are we going to have to hear? Because this addiction thing is real and it's affecting a lot of people.
I mean, for even me, man, there's a high of buying a card just to buy a card.
Oh yeah.
It is fun to do the hunt and buy the card. And then you have the card and you spent hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, whatever you spend. And hopefully you actually have that cash, because if you don't,
it's all a hobby until April 15th every year. But
to that.
This is not my opinion. I feel the opposite way, but like to look at it from like a devil's advocate point of view here, if you are Fanatics and you're aware that this happened, that they said this stuff and that people are outraged, the way that they're probably looking at it is, okay, we'll let the people decide. And I'm assuming, based on what I have seen, that Fanatics is not losing. They're still breaking. They're still making money. Their rooms are still full of people and they're still providing business. I think if Fanatics was watching and people were just like, no, and the next backyard breaks that they did on Whatnot had like 10% of the people in there, then I feel like Topps would be like, okay, people are upset about this. We need to do something. But they weren't.
The issue with that, though, is assuming everybody's connected to social media and seeing that this happened, that they're giving money because he stepped away, but he's still a co-owner of course, this company. Yeah. And so Topps is still funding this guy. And so it's up to them if they feel like it's a moral responsibility or not. And right now it doesn't look like they do. And so like,
they definitely don't.
It's just the people, maybe that would happen, Chris, but that would require mainstream coverage from news networks, which is not going to be happening. There's stupid comments made in everything. So like that's the other problem is maybe we are such a small niche. Well, yeah, we're outraged, but there's a couple.
Yeah,
dozen
Scott. But like
outlets.
Phil
I don't
said,
know.
it's this it's a feature, not a bug, right? So I don't think they're losing fans or customers because that's what drew them this type of banter that goes on. That's what drew them to that specific breaker platform anyway. So I don't think that would be a situation where those people, even if they did know, which I think a lot of their customers do
It
know
wouldn't
about,
matter to them.
wouldn't matter.
No, I mean the people that
Yeah,
heard it,
it's a bigger systemic
There's
issue.
been so many places to buy brakes. And it's not like backyard brakes are good, like price wise.
no,
That's
correct. You can edit and correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't Backyard Breaks the group that pulled that like a huge card and then just kept it for themselves and didn't give it to their customers?
Trevor
Yeah,
Lawrence, gold rookie.
Yeah, they gave away a free
Gold
pack
Kaboom.
and kept it. It was a gold Kaboom Trevor Lawrence out of 10 rookie.
I mean, how did that not end their business like right then and there? Like, who buys into the
Because-
next break after that happens?
All we do is talk about it, and then we just go to the next scandal and talk about that all the time, forever.
I mean, we know that that Boston Card Hunter has talked about, and I'm sure I'm sure there is a niche already, but OnlyFans like breaking, I'm sure is coming if it doesn't exist already. Is Topps going to be like, hey, no nude breaking? Like, we're not going to allow that?
Who knows?
I doubt it.
How can they on their platform? Yes.
Yeah,
But,
certainly
like,
not on Fanatics Live. We're not going to see, Mama's Breaks doing a dance while she rips cards. But like, if someone on OnlyFans wants to buy cases and do breaks, and while they're taking their clothes off or whatever, do you think Topps is going to say no? I don't know.
But I think at least if you're talking about people that are of age, there's a little bit more leeway there
That's a good point.
than what we're talking about specifically with this week's comments. But yeah, I think that's the direction it's going. As Phil said, these breakers exist and pop up because there's the demand for it.
Yeah.
And if there wasn't the demand, they wouldn't exist. So I think Fanatics is just trying to see where things are going to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of, well, I wouldn't say benefit, but that kind of goes hand in hand with you having half the marketing budget that you ordinarily would have because you're relying on your breakers to do the hype, the marketing, and all of that from their side of the table, right? That's why this works so well for Fanatics. So a lot of the marketing kind of is their original strategies that are created by these breakers. So they do it first, then Fanatics, by inaction, lack of, scolding them, reprimanding them, is saying that we're okay with that. So I would guess that if there was a legal way of doing what you're saying, bringing like half nude girls onto streams, then Fanatics would end up being okay with it indirectly by not doing anything.
We've already seen it. It wasn't Backyard Breaks. It was Backyard Breaks.
Someone did it like in Vegas.
They did it with Leighton Sports Cards, Backyard Breaks. It was that really big basketball chase thing they did. They did bring on girls and this like the ring girls at fights. Yeah. That's what it was essentially.
I mean, I've heard of that. I've never seen it. I don't know.
I have never felt more disconnected from Topps products than right now between this like bro environment and the cost than ever. Like I can't even tell you how little I'm going to open a Topps product in the future. Like, so they are doing something wrong, but at the same time, like I said, Phil, like they lost Scott Baldwin in my couple $100 a year, but they gained all these other people who spend thousands of dollars a year. So it is what it is. But I'm kind of out on opening any wax because it's stupid.
Yeah, so some positive advice for the viewers. You can choose however you want to engage with a hobby.
Yes.
And you can be the ultimate authority over whether this scandal affects you or not. Does it hurt your mood? Does it make it hard for you to sleep at night? That's really in your control, because in a lot of ways, this is isolated to a different part of how someone else in this industry engages with their hobby, or how other people engage with their hobby, even if they do seem to be a majority at this point and growing larger by the day. So, I mean, it still affects you with product prices. It still affects you with dilution of parallels across all of the existing and new sets and everything, and overproduction. But, if you're a singles collector, you can get around that even more.
All right. Well, we feeling good? Any final thoughts? Set our piece.
I think Phil summed it up really nicely right there.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments down below if you feel similarly, how you feel about the situation, and we'll see you in the next video.